All right. Good morning, y'all. Welcome to the Be the One podcast. This is a really special podcast of talking about College Board and testing and accommodations. And we just wanted to take this opportunity since you guys both get so many questions from parents and just thought, let's just talk about it. So let's start with the College Board, what the College Board is and what tests come up under the umbrella of the College Board.
Yeah, so for us, when it comes to College Board testing, that's going to include our PSAT 8 and 9, which is given to 8th and 9th graders in the fall each year. And then it's also the PSAT and MSQT, which is the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. And we have our sophomores and juniors take that test. Also, the seniors will take SAT. We do give the SAT to our juniors in the spring as well. But then also part of College Board is going to be AP testing. So that kind of concludes the College Board umbrella of testing. But then, of course, we also have the ACT.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
We do a lot here that is under the umbrella of the College Board. Yes. Okay, so we want to talk about timelines and we want to talk about accommodations. And so I'm not really sure where to delve in first. I guess let's do timelines. Let's do that. So you mentioned a little bit about when you give to what, but like if you're applying to colleges, when do you want to start with these tests?
Yeah, so College Board and ACT both recommend that you take your first test in the spring of your junior year. So we actually offer our school day testing to our juniors in the spring. We register them automatically for those tests. We say, let's take both of those tests. Let's see which one you do better on, and then move forward with that test. Those tests are offered nationally throughout the year on Saturdays. So it is great that we are able to test our students here at school during the school day.
Oh, it really is.
But then they're
great.
Also able to do those outside tests as well. With the PSAT, again, that's something that we're going to register them for. That's going to be in October of each year.
Okay. So when looking at accommodations, before we delve into those timelines, let's just take a step back and talk about accommodations because it is a lot.
Yes.
It is a lot.
The accommodation piece is something that we obviously offer here at Brookstone. That's kind of under our Brookstone umbrella that starts with the psychological evaluation that's done and the recommendations that are made from the psychologist. So we have that here at school. And that is something that kids utilize, and it's such a gift and needed for the students who need it. But it works differently when you look at College Board and ACT. And so those are things that it's all going to start with the report that you get from the psychologist before we can make any steps with College Board and ACT. College Board wants, and what we're seeing this year is they want a minimum of 4 months that they've had an evaluation before you apply them for accommodations. However, this year, for whatever reason, kind of across the board, we've seen where that's just having it for 4 months isn't enough. They're wanting to see that students are using their accommodations regularly, that they've had an evaluation done prior to high school even. And so that can be something that's difficult and challenging for families because one, there's a financial investment that's made on that. Two, sometimes it might be that it's either that you've not previously been in a school where you're recognizing that there's a need, where you don't have teachers who are able to kind of spot some of the learning differences like we have teachers here that are able to. Maybe they're moving from somewhere else. And so there are different reasons for why kids are getting tested at different points in time. But the sooner you can do it, the better off your student will be going through the approval process with both College Board and ACT.
So like freshman, sophomore year, the sooner you can get that evaluation from the psychiatrist. And
even so, because our 8th graders are taking the PSAT 8, 9, they can get College Board approval, and they need College Board approval to be able to take any College Board or their PSAT 8, 9. They have to have the evaluation done and they have to be approved.
And that's changed recently.
And that's changed recently.
Previously, I think before this year, really, those 8th grade students, we were able to just give them those accommodations if they were approved by the school. But now College Board is saying, hey, no, you have to be approved through us now.
College Board.
And that is mostly extended time, or it could be any of their accommodations.
Yes, and it would be extended time. It's going to be testing in a different location, a smaller group. And then if you have, this also includes any medical accommodations that a student might have. diabetes is one that I think of right off the bat that, that needs accommodations, just to test separately.
So so when you say regularly using their accommodations, explain what that means. Not just like they just are doing it for the College Board, they are doing that in the classroom.
Right, and that they're coming in and that they are using the extended time testing room. I go out on a limb and say that they need to be coming in probably for about any test that they're taking. Quizzes work as well.
Right. Okay.
And I also know too that sometimes a student might not want to use it because they feel like either they're kind of getting singled out that way,
right,
or that they like having access to the teacher. But the nice thing with the extended time room is that there are ways that the person in the extended time room can help those students, whether it is by answering a question that a student has, just as any teacher would, or sealing it up the test and letting the student take it to the teacher to answer that specific question.
There you go. And so parents, if they're thinking, wouldn't that be great if they could have extended time, but if they see the need that they think their child might benefit from that. So really the first step is getting that psychological evaluation.
Yes.
And that can take some time.
It can, because a lot of the psychologists are going to have a kind of a wait list almost until they can get somebody in. And you're also looking at the way that many of these psychologists that we recommend, they're giving you a 30-page write-up on your child. So it's not just a come in and you're going to leave with a few pages. Like you're getting a full write-up, and you're going to learn learning styles. You're going to learn whether or not it's visual, auditory, how their processing works. So it's so comprehensive.
Right. So if you were to, you would need to do this, you're saying, basically before your junior year. You're saying that your junior year might be too late to receive College Board accommodations.
Because if you're looking at junior year, even if you do it in September of junior year, you're not looking at being able to even apply until you're taking the SAT in the fall. I mean, in the spring, I'm sorry. Right. And then if you do have any AP classes, those can start as early as 9th grade.
Yeah, that's true. So we're not just talking about PSAT and SAT. We're talking about the AP too. And what does that look like here at Brookstone? I mean, we're already so when you would have AP accommodations, I mean, the whole school's involved in testing over these last 2 weeks in May or whatever it is. So how does that look when students receive accommodations?
So Jeremy and I work really closely together with the AP testing. And for that, it's a puzzle. And it's like you've got this grid, and I have a table that I can use an expo marker on, and I have, everything kind of drawn out on it. And because it is, if you're looking at a student who gets a typing accommodation, that they've got to be either in a room with one or two other students with a typing accommodation, or they're by themselves. Right. So then you're looking at getting proctors, you're looking at getting spaces, and then you have the big groups too. So it is there is a puzzle behind it.
Yeah, this is something that we work on pretty much all year. It's like the first day of school, we typically talk, and we're like, here we go. Let's get ready.
Do you have the proctors? Do you have the rooms? Because it could be that you've got a test one morning, and because the student has extended time, the test that would take 3 hours is going to take 5 hours. So then, there's certain spaces you can't use because you've got a student there. And it'll bleed over into the afternoon exam. So
A puzzle is a good word for it.
It is
making it all fit. Okay, so you say that when you talk about documenting their use, so how do students, like if parents are like, how do they even know that you're using the accommodations? How does that work?
So when they get emails each week, and
students or parents?
The students and middle school parents probably get the email as well, saying like, here's the form, sign up for any of the tests you have this week. That automatically puts it into a Google form, and then you can filter it by who's using it, what classes are being used most often, what grade's using it, and then that's the kind of documentation that we can send to College Board or ACT if they ask for it. And I think that that's probably just fallout from the Varsity Blues scandal. And we are not looking to be on a Netflix documentary.
It's a good goal. So, so especially when it comes to high school students, how do parents empower their students to take ownership of this process?
I think it comes down to communication. I think just having conversations about testing, about the importance of it, and that every piece of this matters. And so you have to kind of think down the road a little bit. And so I think it's just having that conversation with the student to say, hey, I know that this feels really far away, but this is something that we need to kind of start working on now.
Yes.
And that's something that we certainly try to help with as well. With the testing, with college in general, really all of it. But I think it really just comes down to having those conversations.
Yeah.
And I would say, too, that it is something that your child should probably be registering for, even if you're there sitting with them, because there are going to be some questions on there that they might need help with. But giving them that ownership of letting them walk through what that is. Because it also gets to where once they turn 18, College Board won't release anything to parents.
Right.
That has to go straight to the child. And so it's a little bit of
that's hard.
Giving them the reins to it.
Right. Now, but does the school apply for the accommodations on their behalf, or you're saying the students actually have to submit the application?
So the school does submit them for approval for accommodations for both College Board and ACT.
Okay.
The processes are just a little bit different. That when you register for the ACT, you can check a little box,
I see what you're saying.
or a little radio button, and it says, yes, I'm looking for accommodations.
Right. Okay.
And then that shoots the person, me, an email saying that they're taking the ACT and that they need to go through the approval process. And for both of them, both College Board and ACT, once you receive accommodations, you're done. You don't have to go through the process each time you take it. It's a one-time thing. So
even if it's a ninth grader taking an AP test, that will carry over.
Have it for the duration of high school.
That's great. That's fantastic. Okay, not that this is your area per se, but then that doesn't carry over to college.
Correct.
So that once a student becomes a freshman at a college or university, then they have to start that process again.
Yes, and they'll do that with their university or college.
Okay. But it's a good news that colleges do also offer accommodations.
And then I'll say, too, that you hold on to all this because if down the road your child wants to go to law school, med school, graduate school, they can apply for extended time and accommodations on those exams as well.
That's fantastic. So
having that documentation on the front end is helpful.
It's helpful for sure. So we've already talked about timelines about when you take these tests, but let's talk about timelines about when you send scores and how that works. So I know we're shifting a little bit from accommodations to scores, but let's talk about that.
Yeah. So really, what you really want to do is you want to send your scores every time that you test.
Okay.
So part of your registration includes free score sends. So for both SAT and ACT, you can send your scores to 4 schools right off the bat.
That's awesome.
So you really want to go through, have that list of 4 schools, and you want to list those schools every single time.
Yeah, same 4 schools every time.
Well, right. Same 4 schools. If you decide, you know what, I don't want to go to the school anymore, I don't plan to apply, then that's fine to change out.
Right.
But you want to do that because pretty much every school is either going to super score or look at your highest single test score. Right. So when you don't send your scores automatically, then you have to go back and try to keep track of what score has gone where.
Right.
And so that can get you in a little bit of trouble when you're trying to submit applications. It's senior year. You're doing everything else.
Right.
It becomes really hard to keep track of.
Right.
So our recommendation is always to go ahead and send those scores automatically.
Right. And again, that's often the student filling out these applications often. And so the parents can be sitting with them, but it could be this needs to be heard by the students. You've got to make sure you're selecting.
That's right.
These
So
schools.
it's totally on the student. I don't have access to send the scores.
Right.
Haley doesn't. Nobody at Brookstone can send the scores except for the student. So we don't really know what scores you've sent either.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why we just say go ahead and do it. It's not going to hurt you.
That's great advice because I do think that sometimes they're like, oh, I did that the first test. So yeah, that's good advice. I want to go back and talk about when the College Board denies you accommodations. And you said that's new this year.
Yes. And it's something I'd not experienced in the 2 years prior to this. And as I said, I think it has something to do with just being sure that the kids who are going through the system are the ones that need the accommodations. And in some cases, in some schools, it might be that they're kind of working the system.
Right.
It's frustrating when you're in a school like this where they've already gone through the ringer to get the accommodations and to know that these are the students, that this is helpful for them, it's necessary for their learning, to then go through the process and be denied.
Right.
And it is one of those that, we can go back through and appeal. There's, through teacher letters, parent letters, demonstrating the use with documentation, grade reports or scores, whatever we can do. We'll resubmit. There's no guarantee that it's going to work.
Right.
But we have been doing that this year, which we've seen some success with. Not 100%, but it's kind of giving it our all.
Right.
And seeing what we can do to help those students. But again, I think it's why it's important if you have teachers along the way that start, suggesting that accommodations might be useful, or maybe that there's a learning difference there. Right. Not waiting to find out when they're a junior, like, they've been living with dyslexia for their whole life. Right. That's not the kind of surprise you want your junior year. Right. You want to get those things addressed earlier. And again, it might be that that's not been something that's been brought up, whether for whatever reason. But paying attention to those either suggestions or just flags, and they might not even be red or orange flags, but just something a teacher's noticing. Right. Because then you can start them on the path earlier, where I think that you'd probably see greater success getting accommodations earlier rather than like sophomore year, junior year.
Right. That's good to know. All right. So speaking of advice, like, this process is so complicated, and we're so grateful for the work that you guys do. And I should say, you are in the college counseling office. I didn't even say this at the beginning, with Frances Berry. And you, although you were our lower school counselor, this used to be your role in the Learning Center. So you're still very much hands-on in this process. I mean, what a gift to our parents and to our students that you guys are there as resources, because it's very complicated. It can be very overwhelming. So a piece of advice, if you had anything you could say to parents or students in this process, what would it be?
I think I would say to just trust the process. It's kind of the same advice that I give about the college process. It's lengthy and it takes time, but you really do just have to take it one step at a time. So whether it's going through the approval process for accommodations or just taking the test in general, just take it one step at a time. Know that, that first test, maybe it's not going to be great, but you're going to get there. We can certainly talk about how to improve scores. We can do test prep later. So I think just trust the process, take it one step at a time.
That's great.
Well, I guess that's really good advice, because that's what I was going to say too. But trust the process. But in that too, it's knowing that this is a stepping stone to more. It's like climbing a mountain. That you're going to take these different tests, and that one test isn't going to shoot you to the top of the mountain. That it's going to be a process, and that figure out how you test. Figure out, if there are certain areas that you need to focus on more. And it's easy for me to say because I've been there and I've done that, but like, don't stress. It is a big test. But it's also just something that you do to get onto the next thing. And nobody's ever asked me what my SAT score was.
I know. Is that not the truth?
No.
You're not having to whip out that information.
No. And that your Brookstone equips you, and you have the right people in place to help you get there. That it's a number, and that's all it is. Right.
That's really good advice. So, well, again, I appreciate everything y'all do for our students and for our parents. And so thank you for this opportunity too, because I do think that, like I said, it can be so complicated, and you guys really help break it down and make it more manageable in every way. So thank y'all for what you do. All right. We'll have you back again. If there's any other hot topics that we need to talk about, let's do it.
Thank you, Avery.
Thanks. Y'all.